You ever heard of Route 6? It's a stretch of road that runs right through the heart of our town. Folks around here say it's haunted, and if you ever find yourself driving down that lonely highway at night, you might just believe them. The road itself is eerie enough, with its dim streetlights barely piercing the darkness. But what really gives people the chills is that old phone booth standing alone by the crossroads. It's been there for as long as anyone can remember, a silent sentinel watching over the desolate landscape. The phone booth is a relic from another time, a time before cell phones and instant communication. Back then, it was a lifeline for travelers and locals alike. But now, it stands abandoned, covered in rust and cobwebs, like something out of a horror movie. The booth is covered in cobwebs and the phone itself is rusty and decaying. It's a haunting sight, especially at night when the shadows seem to come alive. People say that if you listen closely you can hear the faint sound of the phone ringing, even though it's been disconnected for years. Back in the day, that phone booth was a lifeline. It was a place where people could make a call in an emergency, or just check in with loved ones. It was a symbol of connection and communication. But now, it's just a relic, a reminder of a simpler time. Nowadays the phone booth is just a relic, a nostalgic reminder of a time when life was simpler and communication wasn't instant. But don't let its appearance fool you. There's more to that old phone booth than meets the eye. But don't let that fool you. The phone booth holds a secret, a dark and tragic history that most people would rather forget. It's a story that folks whisper about around campfires, a story that sends shivers down your spine. The story goes that many years ago, a young woman made a call from that phone booth late one night. She was never seen again. Some say she was taken by something supernatural, others believe she met a more earthly fate. But whatever happened, her disappearance remains a mystery to this day. It's a story that has been passed down through generations, growing more chilling with each retelling. People gather around campfires to share the tale, their voices hushed and their eyes wide with fear. It's a story that sends shivers down your spine, a reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved. They say a young woman named Marianne used to wait by that phone booth. Her fiancé was away, fighting in some godforsaken war. Every night she'd wait, clutching a letter, hoping for his call. Then, one stormy night, the phone rang. Marianne rushed to answer, but the line went dead. She tried calling back, desperate, but it was too late. That same night, a drunk driver slammed into the booth. Marianne, she never had a chance. They say she died clutching that letter, her last connection to her love. Now folks say Marianne's spirit never left. They say she's trapped, still waiting for that call, her heart forever broken. People driving by late at night, they claim to see the phone booth glowing, even though it hasn't had power in years. Some even say they've seen a figure, a young woman in a white dress standing by the booth, phone pressed to her ear. Most folks dismiss it as superstition, ghost stories to scare kids. But not me. Not after what I saw, what Pop and I experienced that one unforgettable night. Pop was my best friend, always up for a challenge. We had been inseparable since childhood, sharing countless adventures and mischief. Our bond was unbreakable and we thrived on pushing each other's limits. Whether it was climbing the tallest trees in the neighborhood or sneaking into abandoned buildings, we were always on the lookout for the next thrill. One night, after one too many beers, we got to talking about the haunted phone booth. It was a local legend, a story passed down through generations. They said that if you picked up the phone at midnight and said, "Marianne, your call," something eerie would happen. Most people dismissed it as a silly urban myth, but that night, fueled by alcohol and bravado, it seemed like the perfect challenge. Pop, being the skeptic, laughed it off. He was always the rational one, the voice of reason in our duo. "It's just a story to scare kids," he said, shaking his head. But I could see the glint of curiosity in his eyes. Despite his skepticism, there was a part of him that couldn't resist the lure of the unknown. He said it was all nonsense, so I dared him. "If you're so sure it's just a story, prove it," I challenged. The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of the dare hanging in the air. Pop looked at me, a mix of amusement and determination on his face. "All right," he said finally, "let's do it." Dared him to go to the phone booth at midnight, pick up the phone and say, "Marianne, your call." Stupid, I know. But in that moment, it felt like the ultimate test of courage. The phone booth was located on a deserted street, its glass walls covered in grime and graffiti. It looked like something out of a horror movie, and the thought of standing there alone at midnight sent shivers down my spine. But the alcohol had a hold of us, and besides, Who could resist a good dare? We were young and reckless, convinced of our invincibility. The more we drank, the more the idea seemed like a brilliant adventure. We laughed and joked, trying to mask our growing unease. Deep down, we both knew that this was more than just a silly dare. It was a test of our friendship, our courage, and our willingness to face the unknown. Little did we know, we were about to get a whole lot more than we bargained for. As the clock struck midnight, we made our way to the phone booth, our footsteps echoing in the empty streets. The air was thick with tension, and every shadow seemed to hide a lurking danger. We reached the booth, and Pop took a deep breath before stepping inside. He picked up the receiver, his hand trembling slightly. "Marianne, your call," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the phone crackled to life, and a cold, eerie voice whispered back, "I've been waiting for you." Section 5. The Long Road to Nowhere. Our journey begins. This is where our story takes a turn into the unknown, a path less traveled, filled with uncertainty and anticipation. Midnight. We pulled up to the crossroads, engine idling. The headlights cut through the darkness, casting long shadows that danced on the deserted road. The silence was almost deafening, broken only by the soft hum of the engine. The phone booth stood there, shrouded in darkness, the silence broken only by the chirping of crickets. It was an old relic, a reminder of times long past, standing alone in the night, almost as if it were waiting for us. I could feel a chill run down my spine. The air was thick with tension, and every shadow seemed to hide a secret. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing in the stillness of the night. Pop, trying to mask his own fear, gave me a nervous laugh. His eyes darted around, scanning the darkness for any signs of movement. "It's just a phone booth," he said, but his voice betrayed his unease. "Ready for this?" he asked, his voice a little higher than usual. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my nerves. "Let's do this," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. We both knew there was no turning back now. We stepped out of the truck and into the cool night air. The ground beneath our feet felt solid, yet the atmosphere was charged with an electric tension. Every step we took seemed to echo in the vast emptiness around us. The closer we got to the phone booth, the heavier the air felt, like a weight settling on our chests. It was as if the very air around us was thickening, making it harder to breathe. Each step forward felt like a step into the unknown, a journey into the heart of darkness. My hand trembled as I reached out to touch the phone booth. The metal was cold and unyielding, a stark contrast to the warmth of my skin. It felt like touching a piece of history, a connection to a world that no longer existed. Inside the booth, it was dusty and abandoned. A faint light flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. It was as if the booth had a life of its own, whispering secrets of the past to anyone who dared to listen. We stood there, outside the phone booth, looking at each other with determination. This was it, the moment we had been waiting for, the beginning of our journey into the unknown. We took a deep breath, steeling ourselves for whatever lay ahead. As we walked away from the phone booth, it stood there in the distance, silhouetted against the night sky. It was a beacon, a reminder of where we had started and the long road that lay ahead. Our journey had just begun, and there was no turning back now. We reached the booth. The air grew noticeably colder. The phone booth seemed to pulsate with an unnatural energy. I could hear my own heart pounding in my ears. Pop's face was pale in the moonlight. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a fear I'd never seen before. "Man, this is creepy," he whispered, his voice barely audible. I nodded, unable to speak. He took a deep breath, steeling himself, and reached for the handle of the phone booth door. The moment his hand touched the metal, the phone inside rang, a high-pitched, piercing ring that seemed to echo through the night. Pop jumped back, his eyes wide with terror. I stood frozen, my blood turning to ice. And then we saw her. A figure, shrouded in a white mist, materialized inside the phone booth. It was Marianne. Her face, pale and drawn, was filled with a deep sadness that sent shivers down my spine. She picked up the phone, her voice a mournful whisper. "Hello? Hello?" Panic surged through me. I grabbed Pop's arm and we ran. We didn't stop running until we reached the truck. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Finally, the engine roared to life and we sped away. The image of Marianne's sorrowful face burned into my mind. We never spoke of that night again. But the memory, the sheer terror, it never left us. It's a reminder that some things are best left undisturbed, that some stories are more than just legends. Even now, years later, I still can't drive past that stretch of Route 6 without feeling a shiver down my spine. The phone booth is still there, a silent sentinel shrouded in darkness, and sometimes, late at night when the wind whispers through the trees, I could swear I hear the faint ringing of a phone. Maybe it's just my imagination, or maybe, just maybe, it's Mary Ann still waiting, still hoping for her call to be answered.